Thanks for listening to another episode of the Gifted Performance Podcast. If you're listening or watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, as well as hitting the like button and the notification bell so you never miss a video. If you prefer audio format, search Gifted Performance on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, or your favorite podcasting service, and subscribe today. Make sure you also rate and review the podcast, as that helps us out tremendously. Enjoy the podcast and stay gifted. Welcome back, guys. Another episode of the GPP, the Gifted Performance Podcast, where we give you the knowledge and practical takeaways to improve your own general physical preparedness on a beautiful Thursday, May 13th in somewhat sunny Central Florida. You'll have to excuse me if there's any noises in the background. There's currently an air show going on above my house, and they are just letting it rip. What are the happenings with you folks? Paul, what are you looking at?
My phone, man. How about you mind your own business, maybe?
Yo, flip that shit upside down. We're recording a podcast, dog. Jay, how are you? How's life?
I'm good, man. I'm just sitting here looking out this window. There's some fellas replacing a roof for my neighbors, and they are very efficient.
Dom, look out your window. What do you see? Sadness?
It's actually sunny. It's sunny today in Michigan.
Oh my God, the first day of sun in Michigan since what, Vietnam?
Probably.
I thought Governor Whitmer outlawed sunshine. Didn't she say no more sunshine?
It might have been her last executive order.
No fun.
All right, guys. So today on our episode, we are going to take a quick and sharp skirt left turn away from our usual Q&A structure to talk about things that we did wrong in our past as coaches and what we have learned throughout the years. So just a quick 4-question list here, invoking some very good, very insightful conversation about where we were then and where we are now. First question. This is a very, very nebulous one. It's one that's you can take in a lot of different directions, and I'm going to throw it to Dom first. And it says, do you feel like you are a better coach today than you were in year one? So not like looking back and being like, oh, man, I used to do a lot of stupid stuff. Put yourself in the moment of coaching in year one versus how you feel about your coaching today. Did year one Dom think he was a better coach than year whatever it is now?
Probably because of limited info. I didn't know things that I know now, so I probably thought I was a better coach then versus now. And then, yeah, I think that.
What do they call that? The old Dunning-Kruger?
I think that's the term.
Because holy God, did I think that I was just God's gift to the earth when it came to coaching. I listened to like 2 or 3 episodes of a podcast with Lane Norton about tracking your macros. And I was like, holy shit, I'm going to teach people all about these little macaronis, and they are going to be the best bodybuilders, the healthiest people in the world. So it's funny, like putting yourself back in that situation of like how good you thought you were then. And then you kind of age and you get more experience and you look at yourself now and you're like, wow, you know what? I am just the biggest piece of shit hanging on by a thread. All of my clients might leave me tomorrow. Jay, how about you? Year one, what was year one Jay like?
That was 1937, Ryan.
So he was cruising in the Model T.
Let's see. Year one, gosh, that must have been like, so that was 2002. I guess I was a personal trainer at the time. That's when I got my first cert. That's where I learned it all, was in that certification class, that one book about this thick. If for those not viewing us on YouTube, I'm holding up, this is maybe 4 inches. So a 4-inch tall book.
That's what 4 inches looks like? Oh, Jimmy, I've been lying to you.
In that 4-inch tall book, that's where I learned basically everything that I thought I would ever need to know about body composition. And that was it. And then I learned everything else when it came to coaching bodybuilders from, the finer publications of the day, Muscular Development, Flex Magazine. Those were the bit Muscle Mag. There was actually a Muscle magazine called Muscle Mag. And that's where I learned the majority of that information. At the time, I thought that I had it all figured out. Everybody needs to do bicep curls, 4 sets of 10 to 15, no matter who they were. That's how that works. So yeah, year one, knew it all, had it all figured out.
Did you spend any time diving into the peer-reviewed source known as bodybuilding.com/forum/MISC?
Yes, actually, yes. And that's where I pseudo met the nice fellas like Mr. or Dr. I apologize, Dr. Lane Norton, Dr. Eric Helms, Paul Raviolis. That's where I met all those people. It was back then in the bodybuilding.com forums.
It's Mr. Dr. Lane Norton to you. Paul, I struggle to ask this because I don't even know what kind of answer I'm going to get. What was year one Coach Paul like?
Man, so I took a couple stabs at coaching, and they didn't last very long because I knew I wasn't ready for one reason or another. But then this current kind of, where we finally settled in, and now it's more of a career path. I don't know, man. I went through the ringer with like academics and stuff. And so I already had a lot of humbling experiences, but I will say, like, I probably knew I was going to grow and get better, but I also was kind of a cocky asshole, Like, I was so ready to call people out on Instagram and kind of essentially even like go as far to make an ass out of myself, So like there probably was a side of me that, for sure, there was a side of me that thought like I was the shit because, I was maybe bringing something a little different to like the scene, the small pond here.
Yeah. Who, by a show of hands, hasn't at some point in their coaching career given in to that call out culture of like, I see something that I disagree with that another coach is doing. Let me go ahead and fire up the old Twitter fingers because there's about to be a war on these streets. We've all done it. We're all guilty here. So here's a kind of like a follow-up question that goes with that. And we'll start with Paul. We'll kind of like snake this up and down, up and down. Your skill set. Has your skill set as a coach developed more as a result of learning, whether that be, resources inside or outside of academia, or have you learned more as a result of trial and error?
Trial and error and coaching experience for sure. Like, it's crazy, right? I spent all those years learning both within academics, through undergrad and my master's, as well as outside of that with my own learning and following other coaches and stuff. But a lot of that had such limited practice on like just me or maybe like my girlfriend at the time, maybe a couple friends, but it's not until you really get to it and you have a decent like coaching roster and you have to solve problems and figure out new ways to attack things that all that theory just clicks and it makes sense. And why, because the way I explain it, when people talk about undergrad, I learned a lot of shit, man. Strength and conditioning class, I know what periodization is. I know what all these terms mean, but I had no idea like what it meant to put it into practice, and how to mold that and it not, me put something on paper and it not look like a copy of something in a textbook and how that looks in real life, So yeah, man, a lot of things have changed over the years, like everything from the amount of data I collect, what I look at to make changes, even like just the way my programs look and the way I attack those. Yeah, man, it's all changed for sure.
What about you, Jay? More from academia or more so from trial and error over the years?
I think it was definitely more trial and error just because I had, I think before I went back to school, I probably had been a personal trainer or a coach for like, well over a decade, like 15 years or something. Like, God, I'm fucking old. And
okay, we still love you, Jay.
So
can you hear me, Jay? Jay?
Huh? So when I went to school, I had this idea that I'm going to go there and they're going to unlock all the things that I need to figure out to be a better coach. And I mean, undergrad, I'm like, so when do we get to like the building programs part? And then we went to the master's program and I was like, so when do we get to the building? And it kind of happened for like maybe a month. We talked about that stuff, but it never, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. But at the end of the day, I learned the mechanisms behind a lot of the things that, a lot of the results that I was trying to get with my clients. I kind of learned the mechanisms to get there. So, but at the end of the day, it was definitely more experience than anything else that helped me as a coach. Academia was great. I see a lot of coaches that come out now and they can get a wealth of information just by Googling things and learning things from there. But I think there's a little bit to spending some time in academia that you just wouldn't get just from Googling things at the end of the day. But experience probably is far more of a determiner of a good coach than necessarily just knowing a bunch of literature and, knowing a bunch of data and learning just the mechanisms behind things. I think it's probably, if I were to put a percentage on it, it might be like 60%, experience, and then 40% of, the things you learn in academia.
Wow. Kind of surprised by those numbers. Dom, if you were to split it up into numbers like Jay did, how would you kind of divvy that up?
Well, I was coaching before I did my master's. So I kind of had a general like background of what I was getting myself into when I went back to school. So I was already in the process. I think being in school at the time of coaching at the same time actually taught me more to apply to clients, but also it allowed me to fix trial and error a lot faster. I think academia reduces the amount of trial and error you have to experience because you generally know what's going on mechanism wise or response wise. That reduces that window of how much trial and error we have to go through. That's why you'll get guys and stuff that are like, oh, you don't need to know all this science stuff, but they have to try so many times to fix something. Rather, I think education reduces that trying to fix something from 5 to twice. So I think that is where experience and academia come together and kind of just reduce that time spent on trying to fix things. But I definitely learned from both ends, though, trial and error. But I feel like my trial and error stems from literature I've read or things I've learned in school, not bro science form things that, people try.
I bet you would even say your trial and error comes from like an academic mindset. Like it's not just let's just try fucking this and then see what happens. You have like a scientific process of figuring it out.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think like I'm not, like when you add food back to somebody's diet, you're trying to get like a thyroid response from it or whatever. We say that because we know that. We're not just saying like, oh, go get a cheat meal to add calories back to get maybe you'll lose weight. Like, like I think that's how academia can come into all this and really have its benefits. But I would say it's more 50-50 for me.
Can I add something real quick?
No.
Fucking no. So like 100%, like even if I were to give a smaller percentage for academics, it's still not representative of how much it actually helps, because you can reason through, because like all the time, let's say I'm talking to somebody and they think a certain supplement causes a certain effect, because they haven't developed certain critical thinking skills. And it's like, no, we can come back to, all these other potential reasons that maybe make a little more sense. And I think that critical thinking side, I mean, it's a skill. And it's a skill that you can develop on your own, but it's just something that is inherent and comes with academics. When you spend time with professors, you spend time with researchers, reading research, or potentially even doing a little bit of research yourself, man. It's just a new way of thinking that, you know, a lot of people miss out on, or skills that they don't build.
I think what it is, like,
go ahead, Jay.
I think what it is for me, it's like I spent so much time fucking it up, you know, before academia, or before coaching even became a thing like it is now. So when I look at it, it's like it's more of the soft skills, I think, that I learned, you know, prior to academia. Like, how do I relate to someone? You know, how do I just have a conversation with them? How do I tease out their quote unquote why? Like, why are they coming to me? How do I tease out all those things, as opposed to just giving them some numbers? Because I'm sure we'd all agree that the approach that we use for a client is going to be a little bit different just based off of who they are. And you learn those things through that first conversation or through a consult. And I probably spend too much time in consults and, you know, having initial conversations with people just to try to figure out who they are. But, you know, I like to use a different approach for everybody. So that's probably where I say that 60% is weighed more towards experience, because I think that it's like that extra 10% is just learning those soft skills.
The soft skills are a huge part of it. It's like, I see the biggest benefit that academia gave me was, like, I knew how to lay out a plan to get someone started. I knew where their volume, their intensity, their exercise selection needed to be to start. I could Harris Benedict the shit out of anybody. But after that point, when things started to go a little awry, and maybe there were some conditions, some concerns that came up that were outside of my field of study, whether they be psychological or physiological, that's when I really started to struggle. And that's when the trial and error really had to come into play, and where, you know, I only really started to gain speed as an efficacious coach after a few years of working with people. So, formal apology to the first couple dozens of people that I worked with about those texts you got from me that were like, well, I plugged your numbers into the equation and it's not making sense, so you're fucking something up. I think we've all been down that fun road before with clients. But yeah, that's that manipulation is the coaching part. That's where you actually do the coaching. I think a lot of, like, evidence-based, very academic-minded individuals come out, their clients are numbers on a spreadsheet, and when the numbers don't make sense, that's when their coaching stops. That's when they just run out of ideas of ways to make things work.
I think we had a conversation on that early on when we first met. I was trying to formula everything I possibly could into a spreadsheet, and you're like, at some point, like, you can't avoid coaching, you know, like you gotta
actually coach people if you want to coach.
So it's funny.
And that was the gist of the conversation that I had with Zach Talander on the podcast episode before. We were talking about the Juggernaut AI, and he said, it's really cool. There's a ton of really awesome equations built in there. It's a very fun system. It provides a lot of value, but, AI does 10 to 15% of the work that an actual coach does. So, that other 85 to 90% is, we were talking about weightlifting. It's looking at the videos. It's why did your technique degrade? Where are you weak? It's doing those actual coaching things. And, as our coaching practices have evolved, we've changed a lot. There are some huge pieces, integral pieces of us as coaches that we've changed. What do you guys think some of those things are? It could be like back end, like where you store data, how you collect data, all that, fat loss, muscle gain, programming, whatever it is. And, I'll toss it out there. Who wants to go first?
For me, I would have to say the biggest was training, because that was never my strong suit. I'd say over the past 2 years, it's probably developed the most. And I would say this year it's developed even further, thanks to Papa Bear Paul. That has definitely been probably the biggest piece of things that's changed for me. Back end stuff, I've always been kind of OCD, pretty organized on things. as far as like tracking for clients and stuff. But definitely learning how to program training was a thing, because for so long, my coaching, I never even gave training. I just did nutrition and kind of just told them like, do a push legs pull split, how whatever movements you want, because I didn't feel confident enough to write an actual training program. So that was probably that's the biggest piece of coaching that's changed for me.
I think
Sign up for the mentoring lab and learn about coaching and exercise selection.
hell yeah, dude.
Link in bio.
I think I could probably pick a lot of like things across the board, but I'll go with programming, because I think early on, if you got a program from me, everything was 5 fucking sets. It didn't matter, and it was just, if I had this idea from day one that you were going to do a block of sets of 10, and the next block was sets of 8, and the next block was sets of 6, that's what we did. And it was predetermined. But I think like over time, I've learned, one, how to interpret like data coming at me from what's actually happening to a client, and two, how to be reactive, I guess, and start to actually make programs that make sense for a person, versus, like I said earlier on that first question, writing things that just look like what you'd probably see in a textbook or something, or a course.
So I had to mute myself right there because I need to get like a GoPro. So like half my screen is just me, and then half the screen is like where the couch where the dogs sit when I'm recording a podcast, because they always just act a fool. And Boo just tried to like hang himself on the curtains over there. But unrelated, Jay, some big things that you've changed over time.
Oh man. That's a long one. So I think, probably some back end stuff would be the biggest change. I mean, when this whole online coaching thing got started, back in the day, we were just personal trainers. And I remember getting my first client that I didn't see, like I couldn't physically see them on a regular basis. And then I remember sending them an email with their meal plan and then their training program. And then years later, that's now online coaching. But I never got very much data from them. I might have gotten their scale weight on a regular basis, something like that, but now we're tracking so many things. So it's definitely a back end change for me. I remember the first time I asked Ryan, I said, "What's your check-in sheet look like?" And then he's like, "I'll send it over to you." And he sent it over to me. I looked at it and I was like, "Oh, this whole thing is just fucked." I'm like, "How is it?" And then I was like, "Oh shit, I've been doing this not wrong, but I'm definitely missing a lot of things." Yeah.
But wait, there's a side to that. So before I sent that check-in sheet to him, I used to do my check-ins. I had one big spreadsheet with people's names on it. The cells here were the names. The cells here were dates and things that they emailed me. And then I kept their weights in a never-ending email chain. That was how I used to do it before that.
Yeah, dude. I mean, my first coach, because my very first client ever, I would get their 7 days of weight. I would have them calculate an average for me, and I would just tell them what their macros were, and that email chain would go forever, because that's what my first
Forever.
coach did. Yeah.
And they'd be like, "Yo, what did I weigh 7
My
weeks
first
ago?"
coach-
And I'd be like, "Stand by for the next 45 minutes as I try and find it."
My first coach never asked for my weight.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
like, "We're doing this whole thing off pictures."
He
And I
knew
was
you
like,
were
"Oh, maybe
getting
that's how you're
huge.
supposed to do this."
I
And
love
see,
it.
dude, these days I don't even photos are um just not as high on the priority list as it probably used to be, or as most coaches, because I mean, fuck it, man. You had a half inch on your biceps and you do a front double bicep photo, you can't see that half inch. So like now I take a lot of measures, and I could do better check-ins with body weight and measures than I can with like if I just got a photo,
Yeah,
by
I
far.
agree. I agree, because like even if like I have a client who checks in and they're like, "Hey, I didn't get a chance to take my pictures. Do you still want them?" And I'm like, "Not really. It's fine. Like as long as your sheet's filled out and all your data's there, like the quarter inch we lost this week, I'm not going to be able to see that. Like, because like usually if I compare pictures, I'm comparing like week 1 to week 7, or like chunks of time, not week to week, week to week, week to week. Because unless you're in prep, like towards the end, then you'll start seeing that kind of change. But for like general population, which is majority of what I work with, as long as I have your data, like if you miss your pictures, it really doesn't change anything that I'm going to adjust for you.
And it's huge information for them because, before I took measures, we could go several months and, I just don't really have a lot to tell them versus now, like a few months go by and it's like, oh, look, you're the same weight you were 6 months ago, 3 months ago, or whatever, but your waist is a half inch smaller and your arms are like a quarter inch bigger, and they're like, oh shit, this is actually fucking working,
Yeah, that's something that I've definitely changed is like the amount of data that I take and then factor into the equation. It's always a red flag for me when someone like only relies on photos or only relies on weigh-ins, only relies on things like measurements. Like these are all pieces of the entire puzzle here, and you put them all together. And like Dom said, if you have all of the data and you're not, 4 weeks out from a contest prep, like your weight average went down by 0.7 this week. You ate your protein. You did all your training. Cool. We can be pretty freaking confident that that 0.7 that you lost is almost entirely body fat. Don't really need to see your pictures that much. Let's move it along and get those pictures next week. And then over 8 weeks, we say, here's week 1, here's week 8. Between these, you lost 10 pounds of body fat. Now we can see that huge difference.
It completely changes how the decisions you make too sometimes, man. Like I remember looking at a sheet with another coach and they were going to pull food and I was like, yeah, their body weight didn't change that much. But look at this measurement. It's like, oh shit, maybe we should wait a week. And then it saves the week, an extra week before they reach that point where they're suffering potentially, or decide to drop out of their show. Like,
yeah, or like it could stop like a premature plateau from happening, like like a premature like pull from food. Like sometimes like clients, like if they progress hard or like if they drop a lot of weight 1 week, like sometimes I won't even change anything for a couple weeks because I just want to ride it out. I don't want to pull food and then maybe I caused the plateau because I pulled food. So I think that's a good way to look at things too, because if waist measurements, things like that are coming down and weight's not really moving, we know we're losing something at that point.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that I've probably changed from the start would have to be the way that I speak to people. When I first got into coaching, it was very much wrongly, of course, about me. Like they had the opportunity to work with me. So like that was something that I was blessing them with. Like they had the honor of paying to be in my presence. And if they fucked up or they went off plan, I was the first one to be like, you're wasting my time. What are we even doing here? Why don't you go hire someone else? You can waste their time instead. And now that I've kind of gotten a little older, a little less egotistical and realized that like this is a very client-driven business, like they have to be the hero of the story and you guide them wherever they tell you they want to go within the story. So, if people miss check-ins for weeks at a time, they fall off plan for a week at a time, they're usually giving you some sort of subtle cue that they want to take their story in a different direction. And it's your job to guide them in the direction. You don't pick the direction that they go. They point the direction that they want to go. You draw the map of how to get there. And if they decide that they want to all ADHD Dora the Explorer on you in the middle of the journey and go in a million different directions, because that's what makes them happy, like that's what they hired you to do. This obviously isn't true for bodybuilders because like start date, end date, I'm getting you from here to here. But lifestyle clients, they shift their mindset all the time. They want to try CrossFit for a week. Then they want to be a bodybuilder. Then they want to squat really heavy. Then they want to, implement some swimming in their training. And it's your job to say, you know what? let's take all those inputs, let's take all those variables, let's balance them in the most effective way we possibly can and get you towards your goal in the way that makes you the happiest possible.
Yes, this just happened to me 2 days ago. Like a client, I changed her. I added a day of training. She was on a 4-day split. She wanted a 5th day. When she originally signed up with me, I had her on 3 low days, like lower days. And she was like, oh, I don't know if I could handle 3 leg days. So I took it out. Whatever. Fast forward, I add this 5th day back and I added a full upper body day. And she was like, why did you not add that 3rd leg day? And I was like, well, you didn't want to do it in the beginning. I was like, I'm not going to make you do something that you don't want to do. Like I want you to have fun during this whole thing, not be like, oh my God, I have legs another day this week. And she was like, oh, I really appreciate that. Like, I was like, I'm here to work with you and communicate with you and do things you enjoy. Even when clients are like, hey, I want to lose a bit more weight. If I don't think it's a terrible idea, fine. We'll shift to a diet phase. That's fine. We can do that. Unless it's really just a bad idea, then I'll explain why I think it's not the best idea to do that right now. And then usually they take that as like, okay, he's explaining it. I learned something, and then they're fine with it. But, if it's not a bad idea, I just go with the flow because at the end of the day, they're paying me to guide them in what they want to do.
100%.
Yeah.
And for a while there, go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, I mean, I've got sort of a similar experience actually that happened recently as well. I'm working with a guy and he's a lifestyle client. I guess he's going off to the Coast Guard soon or something like that. And, he, when I gave him his program and his nutrition and everything, and I think what it was, I didn't program any cardio at all because he said that he was like running and swimming and he's doing all these things. So I just didn't program it. And he saw that as I need to stop doing all of those things. And he's like, a former collegiate swimmer, like he is an athlete at the end of the day. And so I get an email from the other day and he's like, I'm feeling a little bit tired and lethargic. I think I just need to, is it possible for me to go back to the running and swimming? And I'm like, yeah, dude. Like, do you enjoy running and swimming? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, so do that shit. Like, I'm not here to tell you, let me figure out how to make that work. You do the things that you enjoy.
And then that's where a good coach adjusts for that. If my client wants to keep his 20-mile bike rides in his thing, we're going to consider that in his expenditure and adjust his diet accordingly and let him enjoy the things he's enjoying.
But for the longest time, I considered that to be bad coaching. It was like, client comes to you, they hire you to go from A to B, detours to C, D, E, F, and everywhere in between are not what was agreed upon at the start. So that would be bad coaching by allowing them those like flexible side tracks along their path. And I've definitely got away from that mentality. But what are some other things that you guys have done in the past?
I want to add something to that. I do
Then
still
get up in there, Paul.
I do still think it's good coaching to, like, if somebody has an idea and you're like, well, like, this could be an obstacle towards getting you to wherever, or this is why I think it's a bad idea. But ultimately, like, yeah, I've had those situations where I'm like, I don't think you should do this. I think that it is harmful to your goal in this and this way. But if you really want to do it, we'll do it. Just know that there may be some trade-off.
Yeah, I've got a guy, and he's like the sweetest guy ever. And, he's a competitor, and he sent me a message one day, and he said, he asked me how do I felt about, active rest, like doing something outside of his normal training. I said, yeah, dude, do that. Like whatever it is. And then I thought about it. I said, wait a minute, what is the thing that you want to do? Like, what is this thing? And he said, I just like to go to the gym and just do some light sets. And I said, no. I'm like, no, let's back this thing way up here at the end of the day. And let's address why you feel the need to be in the gym 7 days a week. And one of those days just being some light work just because you like being in the gym. Like there's nothing else that you enjoy. And we kind of unraveled that a little bit. And he kind of started to assess what the gym meant to him and what bodybuilding meant to him. And, the things he was almost using that as an outlet to kind of push other shit that was going on in his life away. And we kind of had, a chat about that stuff. So there are some instances where you may have to back people away from their ideas a little bit, but for the most part, do whatever you like to do,
It's a lifelong endeavor. It sure as hell should be fun, at least along the way, or it might not. Might not be something you stick with for life. Now, I am going to add the caveat on this question, on this next question. You can't say meal plans. All right. Meal plans are off the table. We've talked about it a million times before. So, what are some other things that you originally got away from that you thought were bad coaching, but you've kind of come back around to in your later years within the field?
Oh, I'll let somebody else start, but I just thought of one.
No, Paul, go.
Um, so early on, I thought giving somebody a pre-made, more or less cookie cutter template for training to start off with was bad coaching, you know? So like I would have this big call, we talk about what they want to brought up, and I would just sort of throw them right into specialization training. But then I started thinking like, man, I don't know anything about this guy. Like, you know, what kind of volumes they need, you know, and just to, you know, keep fatigue from being more or less like too much and just stuff like that. And I was like, actually, it probably makes the most sense to give somebody a cookie cutter template that it has a good amount of, you know, exercise selection, you know, basic exercise order, basic volumes that most people will respond to, and just see what happens. And chances are a lot of times that already, I feel like, beats the hell out of whatever they were doing before. And sometimes you find like, oh shit, we didn't have to do anything crazy to get you to grow. We just needed to give you a decent, intelligent, well-rounded plan. And then from there, once I start to see your response over a training cycle or a few training cycles, if we need to, then we start individualizing training a little more. And to
Yeah,
me, that is a better coaching process.
I actually had this conversation with a new client yesterday, and I was like, I'm going to start you with some training that is very basic, looks very simple, because there is a very good chance here that you are within that normal bell curve. Like, chances are, if we draw out that bell curve, you're in here. You're probably not out here, and you're probably not out here. So I'm going to give you training that causes the most adaptation for the people that are in the middle of the bell curve. And if you start to adapt like you're out here or you're out here, then we can adjust the training accordingly. But until that point comes, we're going to give you some training that'll work reasonably well for most people given, you know, intelligent programming constraints. So my thing that I thought was bad coaching in the past, I'll go next, was probably like meal plans. No, I'm just kidding. Jay and Dom, I'll let you guys go next.
I don't know, because I feel like I've been coaching the same for a long time, and it's just gotten more detailed over time. I can't, like, I never believed in fasted cardio from day one, and I still don't. So I didn't come back to that.
Do you have any clients that do fasted cardio though?
Yeah, I let them just on a schedule thing. If they like it, if they like starting their day with it. One thing, I don't know. Jay, let go, because I got to think.
So there was a time where HIIT cardio was the primary way or the only way that you could lose fat. That was like, you know, that just made sense. And I remember when I first met
all the steady state.
I remember when I first met Ryan, we were both in a competition prep. And it was like Ryan, Steve, and myself were all in a competition prep, and we were all doing HIIT cardio on the stair mill. And like there were times I'm like barely hanging on, like my legs are dragging off the bottom of it. Like just because that was
holding onto the rails and letting his legs drag. We're like, Jay, that's not how you do it.
The steps were just beating me in the face. But that was the only way that we could lose fat. You know, that was the way that you had to do it. Like you just suffer on the Airdyne bike until you lose fat. That was the only way to do it. And then once that, and I think it may have been something that Lyle wrote or said or something where it makes sense, you know, steady state cardio was far more efficient because you can just do more of it. You can't do 45 minutes of HIIT cardio. You die. So I'd stepped away from that, and I'd run into people that say, I don't have a lot of time to do a lot of things. Their step count was real low. And I'd just be like, well, steady state cardio, you got to figure out a way to make it work. You just got to steady state your way there. And then now I've come to the conclusion, like, can you do HIIT cardio? Yeah. Do you have 15 minutes? Yeah. Okay. Then let's do some HIIT cardio. Let's just get you doing something at the end of the day and just kind of create more of a deficit. And also there's heart health benefits, which are probably quite a bit important because your heart is fairly important. So probably HIIT cardio would be the thing that I'd kind of stepped away from. And then now I'm, I'm embracing it again, almost like a long lost lover.
I got it.
He's got it. Dom has found his long lost lover.
You're not going to believe it either because of me, like because of what I do. I thought giving too much fruit was bad coaching.
Wow.
And now we know about how that goes.
Was I around?
Today.
Huh? Was I around when that light bulb went off? Because I remember there was like a point in time where you hit that pretty hard on your Instagram stories.
Probably because I remember somebody had just said something about eating fruit and how bad it was and like how detrimental it could be to fat loss. And I told Paul, I was like, I'm doing this whole prep eating fruit the whole time.
So I think you can give kind of people a realization like in real time by having them eat, 400 calories or 800 calories, whatever it is, of carbs from like Pop-Tarts, and then do that same thing with strawberries. Try and eat 800 calories worth of strawberries. Like it would honestly be bigger than that. I mean, how many pounds is it?
I'll try it today.
Yes. All right. So we'll math that out and we'll try it today. And Dom will do full day of eating on my story, guys. Everyone requested to see a full day of eating. I have to eat 4 pounds of strawberries because I said I would. What did I do that was dumb? Man, a lot of stuff. So much stuff. I had one on my mind, but then it slipped and now it's coming back. So there was a period of time that was like, I was genuinely convinced that if you wanted to keep your calories higher during prep, you could just do more cardio. So like eat 3,000 calories every day throughout your entire contest prep or your entire fat loss diet. Just do like 700, 800 calories of cardio a day. And then those numbers will like match up because, it's just CICO, baby. I was a CICO path, a psychopath at the time. And I thought, if you could do all those extra calories, and then, I actually read a book or two, Theory of Constrained Energy, all that good stuff, hunger response from doing too much cardio. And I was like, you know what? This is not an intelligent standpoint. But there was an even less intelligent standpoint. And Jay, I'm gonna bring you back here. Do you remember the cardio-free prep? He does. He remembers it. There was a period of like 3 months where everyone was like, you don't even have to do cardio during prep. And as a matter of fact, you shouldn't. Just get all of your calorie deficit from food.
What you didn't hear about were the few people that did it successfully, because nobody talked about step count back then. They were fucking getting 10 to 15,000 steps a day, and that was their cardio. That was their steady state cardio, like.
Dude, I think we were talking about that the other day where I think I made that comment where there was a time, and it's when eating a bunch of carbs was the thing. Like if you could prep on a shit ton of carbs, you were, everybody's like bowing down to you. And I was one of those people where I would diet on like 3,500 to 4,000 calories. But at the time I was running a restaurant. So I walked, like my step count was like 15,000, 20,000 steps a day. So I needed that many calories just to not lose weight at a ridiculous rate. So it's, but I definitely remember those. And I remember bragging about, I don't do any cardio outside of like a 5-minute warm up. You're doing cardio every day, asshole. You work 60 hours a week on your feet, you dummy.
You know what I reflect back on and hate? There's one prep client in general that really it comes back, and I always in the back of my mind I'm like, man, I hope he hires me again to do another prep for him because he was getting like 12,000 steps a day, and I still cardioed him down. And I look back now, I'm like, dude, I know that I could get him within that 4 week stretch, no cardio, maybe no cardio the whole fucking way, like.
Just send him a DM. I'm sorry, and then explain
Yeah,
why you're sorry and all the bad things you did.
get smarter over time, dude.
So here we are in year three. Yeah, year three, year four of our time here at Gifted Performance. We've had literally hundreds of clients come through our doors. We've all worked with hundreds of people on our own. What do you think your biggest takeaways are reflecting on the past couple years of coaching? Kind of a big little meta question here. My big takeaway is that I love my friends.
I do like
Biggest
this.
takeaways.
I know it's tough, right? So I think we've already talked about kind of like coaching tips, things we did differently in the past, working with people on the psychological side of things. Jay's got something.
I would say I've gotten really good at fitting people's likes, dislikes, like, because I've always done meal plans. You guys have done macros forever. So I think I've gotten really good at constructing some pretty detailed variety meal plans that are like option wise within 60 to 70 calories. So like, depending on their options, they stay within their their calorie goal. I'd say that's probably one of the biggest things. And I worked with a lot of vegan clients. That's a big one that I've definitely like learned how to go full plant-based without just eating tofu 10 times a day.
Do you think that variety has like helped your clients out a lot? Because I think that one of the main drawbacks or counterpoints to like the IFYM kind of way of dieting is that if you give people too many choices, they will inherently fuck it up because they've been fucking it up their entire life, and that's why they applied to work with you in the first place.
Yeah, so like 2 years ago, my variety list was huge. I would give like macros per meal and then an estimated weight of like a carb list this long, and you just had to plug it in where you wanted it. And then I started noticing people just not adhering so well to it. And then I chopped that down, and then I just put like 4 or 5 of them together on an actual meal plan and just tell them pick one of these.
Yeah, so you've actually taken it from so many, super complicated for them, almost impossible to choose, to like whittling it down based on their personal interests.
Yep.
Cool. Jay, what did you have to say there?
I think, and it's going to sound super cheesy, but the biggest takeaway for me, and I think it's just from, my experience as a coach, is even recently, the ability to just ask for help and to use the resources that are available to me. I did this for a while by myself, and that's when everything was a secret. Nobody wanted to tell anybody how they were doing anything because they were all concerned about, losing business or something like that. And now, since joining Gifted, it feels good to like, I can ask Paul like, hey, what do you think about this? And then he can give me a response, or I can, we can ask within the chat, like, what do you guys think about this? How should I handle this? And I think my biggest takeaway is now, use the resources that are available to me as opposed to just trying to do it myself. That would probably be the first one. And the second one, sort of right below. Can I give 2? Is that legal?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll
The
allow
second
it.
one, kind of really close behind that, is that this is a business at the end of the day, in that I should treat it as such the vast majority of the time. It can be, and I was the king of like, maybe I let someone stay on my roster for months on end without getting any revenue. And that would just add to my level of stress over time, because now it's like, I have less time to devote to the people that at least are respectful enough to make sure they compensate me. instead of having, there was a time where I would just do that because I thought it was the nice thing to do. And over time, I've realized like maybe I have a person that might be having some financial problems, and I kind of let them ride for a little bit, but I shouldn't have a roster of like 30 people that haven't paid for 6 months, and they're just adding on to my overall stress level,
Yeah.
Paul, finish us off.
I think something that's huge, I think for me, when I reflect back on my start, is don't be afraid to fuck up, because you are going to fuck up. And, I think back, and I was always so concerned about how a client started. I could spend a fucking hour just deciding what their macros were going to be their first week, or before I went to having a more standardized starting program. I could spend 2 hours writing their first training program, and the start doesn't matter. It matters to an extent. You can have such a bad start that there are consequences later, but the margin of the window of error you're allowed to have when somebody starts is a lot bigger than you would like to think. And it's not about the start. It's about knowing where to go, how to interpret the data, and move from there. You start them on too little food. You find that out over a week or two. Where do you go from there? That's what's important, and that's what coaching is. I think. And yeah, and along with not being afraid to fuck up, like also just not being afraid to try new things. I had a very kind of like Ryan, like this is the way, this is how we're doing it. And, like I had a conversation with Dom on his training program for his improvement season that he sort of built for himself. And, I was like, these are the things that I would probably change. But by all means, if you just want to do this and go for it, do it, man. Like you got to experience it, and you're going to learn something from it, like good or bad. And so I think having that mindset is huge just for continual growth, and not staying inside that box and looking back 3 years later and, being asked these questions and saying, I do everything exactly the same. It all worked. Why would I change it?
Yeah, I feel like that's a big thing. I feel like you and I do that a lot. Like, oh, maybe we could try this. Maybe we should try that. Like that's not what we normally do, but maybe it'd be cool. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I used to be a dick.
You can adjust right away if something goes bent out of shape.
Yeah, I used to be a dick. Like if you talked to me 2 or 3 years ago and like, we were talking over your programming, like I probably would have gotten angry if you were like, no, I think I'm just going to try this. I'd be like, you fucking idiot. Like you would have hated me. Like,
because I mean, what are the percentage point differences in the things that Dom chose to implement versus what you think is quote unquote optimal? I mean, what are we talking about here? Fractions of a percentage point, 1% difference, 2% difference, maybe if that.
Even if they were very different, because there were some big volume differences, but like long term, what is the biggest difference? He does it for 4 weeks. He's like, maybe I should lower my volume a little bit on these muscle groups. And then he corrects. And at the end of the year, he's exactly as big as he would have been. And he learned something from that,
Yeah, and I think people are too scared, like you said, too scared to try those new things because they have that like lost time fallacy. That's like if I spend 4 weeks, doing a strength block or a resensitization phase, I'll lose all my gains or whatever it is. It's like, just give it a shot. You're never gonna find out it's a horrible idea until you try.
And the converse too is like, I've been fucking wrong. The converse is Dom does it and he's like, Paul, I'm glad I didn't fucking listen to you. Right. So.
Yeah, I'd still be on that Stairmaster doing 500 calories of intervals in less than 20 minutes if Jay hadn't been like, hey man, here's this article by Lyle McDonald. Turns out we've been torturing ourselves for no reason. So thank you, Lyle. We'll bring you back on the pod one of these days and let you and Jay just have a fist fight or something like that. All right, folks, there it is. The things we did wrong over the years, what we've learned, and if only someone could come up with a classroom setting, maybe you could even call it a lab, where some mentoring would go down. You would get access to templates to use for yourself, to use for future clients, You would get coaching education. You would get a forum to speak.
We should do that.
I'm just coming up with this on the spot. What we could call it is the hypertrophy and fat loss mentoring lab. That sound about right?
I thought you were going to say hypertrophy and FAP, but fat loss, I think.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes more of like a succinct thing. We could put it on the Gifted Performance storefront now, $99 for your first month, and $99 a month every month after that, gaining access to those templates if you sign up. Actually, this is going to go on like way later. So, hey, just go in the store, sign up, $99 a month, you know?
Whatever, everything's going to be different by the time you get this.
By the time that we actually put this out, that it might be called something way different. It might be called like Paul's porn pocket. And it's just where like Paul dumps all of his like deep internet fetish porn that he finds. And it'll still be $99 a month. So imagine the savings.
Or we could call it Meat Factory, the Meat Factory.
That's going to conclude us for the day. Make sure you go sign up for the mentoring lab so that you can avoid all of the mistakes that the 4 dingleberries on this podcast made throughout their coaching careers. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Bump us up in that algorithm so we can get YouTube rich. Arthas, the Lich King himself, demands it. If you know who that is, just go ahead and comment below and say, I am cool. I am woke. Don't know who that is,
I'm a big
but
closet nerd.
we will
You don't
see
know who this is.
on the next one, guys. Until then, and every moment after this, stay gifted. We love you.
Bye.